The silence at the Thanksgiving table was deafening. My name is Jenna Collins, 32 years old, and for a decade I was the family failure. Then my sister flashed her phone screen, revealing my secret $15 million portfolio to my stunned parents. Their shock quickly curdled into greed. It wasn't an accident, it was an ambush. I had spent years hiding my success from them, but I never imagined they were hiding a far deadlier secret from me. One that a man in a crisp suit was now using to blackmail me. Before I share the rest of my story, drop your city in the comments below. Please hit like and subscribe if you've ever felt like your own family was your biggest battle. Believe me, you won't want to miss how I fought back. I stood behind the counter of the Lantern's Glow, my little antique shop tucked into a quiet corner of Boston's South End. The air smelled of old wood and beeswax polish, the kind of scent that felt like a warm hug. Shelves sagged under the weight of mismatched teacups, brass candlesticks, and leather-bound books no one had opened in decades. Sunlight filtered through the front window, catching dust motes that danced like tiny stars. I adjusted my cardigan, the sleeves frayed from years of nervous tugging, and smiled at the emptiness. This was my sanctuary, my rebellion against the sleek, soulless world my family worshipped. They thought I was a failure. My mother, Helen, with her manicured nails and designer scarves, would purse her lips whenever she mentioned my little hobby shop. My sister, Claire, all sharp suits and sharper ambition, would sigh dramatically as if my life were a personal offense. My father, Richard, just looked through me, his eyes already calculating his next deal. They didn't know the truth, and I liked it that way. Beneath my thrift store jeans and messy bun, I was a damn good appraiser. Over the years, I'd turned dusty estate sales into a multimillion-dollar investment portfolio. I lived simply not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The money was just a quiet victory, a middle finger to their judgment, hidden in plain sight. That morning I was cataloging a chipped porcelain shepherdess when the mail slot clattered. A single envelope lay on the mat, no stamp, no address, just my name scrawled in black ink, Jenna Collins. My stomach twisted. I slid it open with a letter opener, and a yellowed newspaper clipping fluttered out. The headline screamed about an art scandal from the 1960s, something about stolen paintings and a shady dealer. My grandfather's name was in bold. At the bottom, in jagged handwriting, someone had written, "The past is never truly asleep." I froze. The shop's warmth vanished, replaced by a creeping dread that settled in my bones. My grandfather had been a respected art dealer, the foundation of our family's wealth. But this was a secret I didn't know. A crack in the story I'd been told. Worse, someone else knew it too. My hands shook as I shoved the clipping into my pocket. The bell above the door jingled and I flinched, half expecting a ghost. It was just Mrs. Delaney, my regular, asking about a music box. I forced a smile, but my mind was screaming, who sent this? And what do they want? The rest of the day dragged, each tick of the grandfather clock a reminder of that note. I tried to focus, polishing a tarnished silver tray until it gleamed, but my thoughts kept spiraling. Was it a prank? A warning? Did it have something to do with my portfolio, my carefully guarded secret? By closing time, I was a wreck, my nerves frayed like the hem of my sweater. I locked up, the street outside dim and slick with autumn rain. As I pulled my coat tighter, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching, their eyes hidden in the shadows. That night, I sat cross-legged on my apartment floor, the clipping spread out on the coffee table. My place was small, cluttered with thrift store finds, a velvet armchair, a chipped teapot, a stack of novels I never had time to read. It was the opposite of my parents' sterile penthouse, and I loved it for that. But now it felt exposed, like the walls themselves were whispering. I poured a glass of cheap red wine and stared at the note. The past is never truly asleep. It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. Someone knew something about me, or my family, or both, and they wanted me to know they were coming. I barely slept, my dreams a tangle of faceless figures and locked doors. By morning, I was determined to bury the fear. I opened the shop, brewed coffee, and blasted Ella Fitzgerald to drown out the noise in my head. But the dread lingered, a shadow I couldn't shake. I was wiping down the counter when my phone buzzed. It was my mother. I hesitated, then answered. "Jenna, darling," she cooed, her voice dripping with that fake warmth she reserved for public appearances. Claire got another promotion. Isn't that wonderful? She's practically running the firm now. I gritted my teeth. That's great, Mom. We're just worried about you, she went on, not missing a beat. That shop can't be sustainable. Have you thought about a real job? Something stable? I wanted to scream that my little shop had funded a portfolio worth more than Claire's corner office. Instead, I mumbled, I'm fine, Mom, really. She sighed, long and theatrical. Well, we just want what's best for you. I hung up, my chest tight. Their concern was never about me. It was about control, about fitting me into their perfect, polished world. I was still fuming when the bell jingled again. A man stepped inside, tall and thin, his suit too crisp for my dusty shop. He didn't browse, just stood there, his eyes locked on mine. Miss Collins, he said, his voice smooth as ice. You have quite the collection. I forced a smile. Can I help you find something? He didn't answer, just walked slowly toward the counter, his fingers brushing a brass lamp. Some things, he said, are best left undisturbed, wouldn't you agree? My blood ran cold. He knew. Somehow he knew. I managed to stammer, I'm not sure what you mean. He smiled, thin and sharp like a blade. Oh, I think you do. Then he turned and left, the bell's chime echoing in the silence. I stood there, heart pounding, the clipping burning a hole in my pocket. This wasn't random. Someone was circling, tightening a noose I couldn't see, and for the first time in years, I felt truly alone. My carefully built world cracking under the weight of a past I didn't understand. The next morning, I woke to an email that felt like a lifeline. A lawyer named Margaret Hensley was handling the estate of Dr. Everett Klein, a history professor who died suddenly. He'd been a friend of my grandfather's, and his collection, rare books, unverified artifacts, old furniture, was up for liquidation. The estate was a mystery, whispered about in antique circles, and I felt a pull I couldn't explain. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was the clipping still haunting me, but I knew I had to see it. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee gone cold, weighing the risks. The letter, the stranger in my shop, they were warnings, but the estate could hold answers, a thread to unravel my grandfather's past. And if I was honest, I wanted to prove I wasn't afraid. I logged into my investment account, the numbers glowing on the screen, $12.4 million. I'd built it piece by piece, each find a quiet triumph. Now, I'd use it. I wired a bid for the entire library and several furniture pieces, nearly $1 million. My hands shook as I hit send. It was reckless, but it felt like reclaiming control. The shop was quiet that day, the usual hum of customers replaced by my own restless energy. I dusted shelves I'd cleaned yesterday, rearranged a display of vintage lockets, anything to keep my hands busy. My phone buzzed again, Claire this time. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. Jenna? Her voice was all forced cheer. Just checking in, Mom says you're still playing shopkeeper. I bit back a retort. Yup, still here. You know, she said, her tone shifting to that patronizing lilt. You could do so much more. I could get you an interview at my firm, entry level, but it's a start. I gripped the phone tighter. I'm good, Claire, thanks. She sighed, like I was a child refusing vegetables. Fine, just don't say I didn't try. I hung up, my face hot. She didn't want to help. She wanted to win. I was still stewing when the lawyer called. My bid had won. The estate was mine. Exhilaration surged through me, sharp and bright, but it was laced with fear. I was stepping into something bigger than me, something tied to that damn clipping. But I couldn't turn back now. The delivery arrived 2 days later, crates of books and furniture filling the shop's back room. I spent hours unpacking, the smell of old paper and varnish grounding me. Each book felt like a puzzle piece, each chair a story. I was lost in a first edition Austen when my phone pinged. Another email from Margaret Hensley. Dr. Klein's records mention your grandfather frequently. I thought you should know. Attached was a scanned photo of the two men, young and smiling, standing in front of a painting I didn't recognize. My grandfather's eyes were sharp, calculating. I shivered, the clipping's words echoing, "The past is never truly asleep." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that stranger's smile, the way he'd lingered by the counter. I poured another glass of wine and opened my laptop, searching for anything on my grandfather's scandal. The articles were vague, missing paintings, a disgraced dealer, no charges filed. But the dates lined up with the family's first big break, the money that built their empire. My empire too, I realized with a sick lurch. Every dollar I'd earned traced back to him. I slammed the laptop shut, my breath ragged. I wanted to run, to burn the clipping and forget it all, but I couldn't. Not now. I'd bought the estate, crossed a line. Whoever was watching me knew it too. I curled up on the couch, the weight of it all pressing down, and whispered to the empty room. What the hell have I gotten myself into? The secretary desk was a beast, dark mahogany with carved claw feet, the kind of piece that demanded attention. I'd saved it for last, cataloging it late one evening when the shop was quiet. My fingers traced its edges, feeling for hidden compartments like I always did. A soft click, and a panel slid open. My heart stopped. Inside wasn't a treasure, but a leather-bound diary, its pages brittle with age. My grandfather's name was etched on the cover. I sat on the floor, the shop's shadows stretching around me, and opened it. His handwriting was precise, almost cruel in its clarity. Page after page detailed his deals, his clients, his triumphs. Then, halfway through, the tone shifted. He described a shipment of paintings, acquired during the war, sold to private collectors for a fortune. The Collins legacy begins here, he wrote, built on what others were too weak to take. I read it twice, my stomach churning. The family's wealth, my wealth, wasn't just tainted, it was stolen, built on betrayal and greed. I dropped the diary, my hands shaking. Everything I'd built, every quiet victory was a lie. I wasn't the rebel I thought I was just another Collins profiting off a crime. The shop, my sanctuary, felt like a cage now, its walls closing in. I wanted to scream, to tear the diary apart, but I just sat there, numb, the truth sinking in like poison. The next morning, I was still reeling when the bell jingled. A man stepped inside, older, with a tailored coat, and a smile that didn't reach his eye. Miss Collins, he said, like we were old friends. I'm Alistair Finch. I've heard so much about your shop. I forced myself to stand, my legs unsteady. Can I help you? He wandered toward the secretary desk, his fingers brushing the wood. This is a fine piece, he said, his voice low. Some things are best left in the dark, Miss Collins. It preserves their value and their safety. The air turned to ice. He knew about the diary. He had to. I managed a nod, my throat tight. I don't know what you're talking about. His smile widened, cold and knowing. Of course not. He tipped his hat and left, the bell's chime a mocking echo. I locked the door behind him, my heart pounding. This wasn't just a warning anymore. It was blackmail. If the diary got out, it wouldn't just ruin my family's reputation, it would destroy everything I'd built. My career, my shop, my life. I was trapped, and Alistair Finch knew it. I sank to the floor, the diary beside me, and let the tears come. I'd spent years hiding, building a life I thought was mine. Now it was crumbling, and I didn't know how to stop it. All I knew was that I was alone, and the past was coming for me. I woke up on the shop floor, my neck stiff, and the diary still beside me. The morning light was harsh, exposing every crack in my carefully built world. Alistair Finch's words echoed in my head. Some things are best left in the dark. I wanted to crawl into bed and hide, but I couldn't. Not now. I'd spent years proving I wasn't the weak link my family thought I was. I wouldn't let Finch or anyone break me. I brewed coffee, the familiar ritual grounding me, and got to work. The shop was my lifeline, the one place where I was in control. I spent the day making small acquisitions, a set of Victorian mourning rings, a cracked but salvageable Wedgwood vase. Each piece was a brick in the wall I was rebuilding around myself. My hands steadied as I polished the vase, its faint blue glaze catching the light. I wasn't just appraising, I was surviving. That afternoon I called Jasmine, my assistant who'd been out sick. She answered with her usual warmth, her voice like a hug through the phone. You okay, boss? You sound off. I hesitated, then lied. Just tired. Can you cover the shop tomorrow? I've got some leads to chase. Leads, huh? She laughed. You're like a detective in a cardigan. I got you. Her trust steadied me. I hung up and opened my laptop, diving into the antique world's underbelly. Private forums, auction records, whispered rumors. Alistair Finch's name popped up more than I expected. A collector with a spotless reputation, but the whispers told a different story. Unpaid debts, shady deals, a man teetering on ruin. He wasn't just threatening me, he was desperate. That made him dangerous, but it also gave me an edge. Then Claire called. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. Her voice was syrupy, all fake concern. Jenna, I hate to ask, but I need a favor. A loan, actually. It's for a sure-thing investment, totally legit. I'll pay you back in 6 months, tops. My gut screamed, trap, but I played along. How much? 50 grand, she said, like it was pocket change. You've got that shop, right? You must have something saved. I swallowed my anger. She thought I was scraping by, just like the rest of them. I'll think about it, I said, keeping my voice flat. Send me the details. I hung up, my mind racing. Claire wasn't smart enough to play me alone, but she was greedy enough to be someone's pawn. I wired her the money the next day, not because I trusted her, but because I needed to know what she was hiding. It was a gamble, but I was done being the prey. For the first time in days, I felt the scales tip. I wasn't just running anymore, I was hunting. That night, I sat in my apartment, a notebook spread out on the coffee table. I mapped out everything, the clipping, the diary, Finch, Claire's investment. The pieces didn't fit yet, but I could feel the shape of something bigger, something that tied my family's past to my present. I poured a glass of wine and raised it to the empty room. To you, Grandpa, I muttered. Whatever you started, I'm finishing it. The next morning, I walked into the shop with a fire in my chest. Jasmine was there, humming as she dusted a display of old pocket watches. She glanced up, her braids swinging. You look like you're on a mission, I grinned, the first real smile in days. Something like that. I spent the day working my contacts, discreetly asking about Finch. An old auctioneer friend, Marty, met me for coffee and spilled what he knew. Finch was drowning in debt, chasing a big score to save himself. He's been asking about your grandfather's old deals, Marty said, stirring his latte. Says there's a lost painting worth millions. You know anything about that? I shook my head, my heart pounding. Nope, but I'll keep an eye out. Marty's words stuck with me. A painting, the diary, the scandal. It was all connected, and Finch thought I had the key. I wasn't sure if I did, but I'd be damned if I let him corner me. I went back to the shop, locked the door, and pulled out the diary again. This time, I wasn't reading as a granddaughter. I was reading as a hunter. Thanksgiving at my parents' house was a performance, and I was the unwilling star. Their Back Bay brownstone gleamed with polished silver and fresh lilies, the kind of place that screamed money without trying too hard. I wore my usual, a thrift store dress and boots, my hair in a loose braid. Claire smirked as I walked in, her silk blouse practically glowing under the chandelier. Jenna, you made it, she said, like I'd trekked across a war zone. Love the rustic look. I forced a smile. Thanks, Claire, congrats on the promotion. She preened, launching into a monologue about her corner office. My mother fussed over the turkey, her pearls clicking as she moved. My father sat at the head of the table, his face unreadable. The air was thick with their usual mix of pity and disdain, but I was too wired to. I kept thinking about Finch, the diary, Claire's loan. Something was coming, and I needed to be ready. Dinner was a blur of small talk and clinking glasses. I was picking at my mashed potatoes when Claire's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh my God, Jenna! What is this? She turned the screen toward the table. It was an email from my financial advisor, a routine update I'd never shared. The subject line screamed, Portfolio Update, $15 million. The room went silent, the kind of silence that sucks the air out of your lungs. My mother's fork clattered to her plate. Jenna, is this real? I couldn't speak. My eyes locked on Claire, who was doing a bad job of hiding her smirk. This wasn't an accident. She'd planned it, dug into my life like a vulture. I managed to nod, my voice barely a whisper. It's real. The table erupted. My father's face went from shock to calculation in a heartbeat. 15 million? And you've been hiding this? In that shop? My mother started crying, her hands fluttering. How could you lie to us, Jenna? We're your family. Claire leaned back, her eyes gleaming. I mean, wow, who knew our little Jenna was sitting on a fortune? I felt like I was drowning. They weren't shocked, they were angry, like I'd stolen something from them. My father stood, his voice low and sharp. You have an obligation, Jenna, to this family. We've supported you, and now... Supported me? I snapped, my voice breaking. You've spent years telling me I'm nothing. And now you want my money? The room froze. My mother sobbed louder. Claire's smirk faltered. My father just stared, his eyes cold as stone. I grabbed my coat and walked out, the door slamming behind me. The night air hit me like a slap, but I didn't stop until I was back in my apartment, my hands shaking as I locked the door. I sat on the floor, my back against the couch, and let the truth sink in. Claire hadn't just stumbled on that email. She'd hired someone, probably a private investigator, to tear my life open. This wasn't about jealousy, it was about control, about forcing me to share what I'd built. My family didn't love me, they saw me as a resource, a backup plan. I curled my knees to my chest, the weight of it crushing me. I'd spent my life running from their judgment, but I'd never escaped their greed. The next morning, I woke with a headache and a fire in my gut. I wasn't done. Not yet. I opened my laptop and dug into Claire's sure-thing investment. The company's name was vague, a shell corporation with no real footprint. But buried in a public filing, I found a name, Alistair Finch. My blood ran cold. Claire wasn't just a vulture, she was working with him. I kept digging, cross-referencing Finch's deals with my father's investment firm. The pieces clicked together like a puzzle I wished I'd never solved. My father's latest ventures had tanked, bleeding money faster than he could hide. He wasn't just involved with Finch, he was the mastermind. Claire was his pawn, the shiny distraction to keep me off balance. The Thanksgiving ambush, the loan, the threats. It was all him. His concern for me, those years of disappointed sighs, had been a lie. He'd been watching, waiting, ready to cash in when I became useful. I dropped my laptop, my hands shaking. My family wasn't flawed, they were a machine, and I was the cog they'd planned to exploit. My father didn't love me. I sat in the back room of the lantern's glow, the diary open on the table, its pages a map of my family's sins. Jasmine leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed, waiting for me to speak. The shop was quiet, the only sound the faint hum of traffic outside. I felt hollow, like the betrayal had carved out everything I thought I was. But Jasmine's question, "So what do we do now?" kept echoing, a spark in the dark. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice raw. "I could give them what they want, pay them off, disappear. Or I could fight back, expose everything. But either way, I lose." Jasmine shook her head, her braids swinging. "You're not a quitter, Jenna. You built this place from nothing. You're tougher than they'll ever be." Her words hit hard. I'd spent years hiding, thinking it made me strong, but maybe strength wasn't in staying invisible. Maybe it was in standing up, even when it hurt. I thought of my cousin Amanda, the only Collins who'd ever gotten out. She'd cut ties years ago, tired of the family's toxic games. If anyone would understand, it was her. I called her that afternoon, my hands shaking as I dialed. Amanda answered on the second ring, her voice warm but cautious. "Jenna, it's been a while. I need help," I blurted. "It's about the family, Grandpa, everything." There was a long pause, then a sigh. "I'm not surprised. Meet me tomorrow, my place." Amanda lived in a small apartment in Cambridge, cluttered with books and plants, the kind of place that felt lived in, not staged. She poured us tea, her graying hair pulled back, and listened as I spilled the whole story. The clipping, the diary, Finch, my father's betrayal. When I finished, she leaned back, her face grim. "They've always been like this," she said. "Your dad, Helen, Claire, they're vampires feeding off anyone who doesn't fit their mold. Grandpa was the worst of them." I left because I couldn't breathe in that house. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice small. She reached for my hand. "I tried when you were younger, but you wanted to believe they loved you. I get it. It's hard to let go." Her words stung, but they also freed something in me. I wasn't alone in this. Amanda and Jasmine, they were my family, not the Collinses. That night I made a choice. I could hide, let my father and Finch win, or I could tell the truth, no matter the cost. I chose the truth. I contacted an investigative journalist named Sarah Ruiz, who'd written exposés on Boston's elite. We met in a crowded diner, her notebook already open. I handed over the diary, copies of Finch's financial records, and emails tying Claire's investment to my father. My hands shook as I slid the folder across the table. "This will ruin them," Sarah said, her eyes sharp. "You sure you're ready for that?" I thought of my mother's fake tears, Claire's smirk, my father's cold calculations. "I'm sure." Driving home, I felt lighter, like I'd shed a skin I'd outgrown. The shop was waiting, its familiar clutter a reminder of what I'd built. Jasmine was there, taping up a shipment of books. She glanced up, her smile soft. "You did it, didn't you?" I nodded, tears prickling. "Yeah, I did." She hugged me, fierce and quick, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was falling. I was still scared. Exposing the diary meant exposing my own tainted wealth, my career, everything. But I'd chosen to be the one telling my story, not the one hiding from it. I wasn't the family's black sheep anymore. I was Jenna Collins, and I was enough. 4 months later, Sarah's article hit like a bomb. The headlines screamed across the Boston Globe, "Collins family empire built on stolen art, fraud." My father's face was plastered on the front page alongside Finch's. Federal investigators were circling, subpoenas flying. Claire was suspended from her law firm, her corner office stripped away. The city's elite whispered behind their martinis, and for once the Collins name wasn't synonymous with power. It was a punchline. I didn't read the article. I didn't need to. I'd lived it. Instead, I poured my energy into the shop. The lantern's glow was changing, growing. I leased the empty storefront next door and turned it into the Lantern's Glow Archives and Gallery, a space for art, appraisals, and classes on preservation. I hired 2 new staff, including a retired professor who taught free workshops for kids. The shop wasn't just mine anymore. It was a community, a place where people like me, outsiders, dreamers, could belong. Opening day was chaos in the best way. Jasmine hung fairy lights while Amanda set up a tea station. Kids ran through the gallery, their laughter bouncing off the walls. I stood in the center wearing a new dress, not thrift store but still simple, and felt something I hadn't in years. Pride. Not the quiet kind I'd clung to in secret, but the kind that filled your chest and made you stand taller. That afternoon, my parents walked in. I hadn't seen them since Thanksgiving there, and they looked smaller somehow, deflated. My father's suit was wrinkled, his eyes tired. My mother's makeup couldn't hide the lines on her face. They stood by a display of restored books, awkward in a space that wasn't theirs. "Jenna," my father said, his voice low. "Your shop, it's beautiful." My mother nodded, her eyes wet. "We didn't know, Jenna. Not all of it." I wanted to believe her, but I didn't. I just looked at them, the people who'd shaped me and broken me, and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just a quiet distance. "Thanks for coming," I said, and meant it, not because I forgave them, but because their presence was proof I'd survived. They left without another word, the bell chiming softly behind them. I didn't watch them go. That evening we hosted our first Talk and Tea event, a monthly gathering for artists and collectors to share stories. The gallery was packed, chairs crammed between easels and bookshelves. Jasmine emceed, her laugh infectious, while Amanda poured chamomile tea. A group of high schoolers from my new scholarship fund sat in the front row, their notebooks open, eyes bright with questions. I stood at the back, watching it all, and felt a peace I hadn't known was possible. I thought about the diary, now locked in a safe, its secrets no longer mine to carry. I thought about the money, the millions I'd built on a lie. I'd donated a chunk to restitution funds for families affected by the stolen art, and I'd keep giving as long as I could. The rest was for the gallery, for the kids, for the life I was building. True wealth wasn't in a bank account, I realized. It was in the self-respect I'd fought for, the community I'd chosen, the courage to live my own story. As the event wound down, a girl from the scholarship group approached, clutching a sketchbook. "Miss Collins," she said, shy but determined, "I want to be like you someday. You make old things matter." I smiled, my throat tight. "You'll do better than me, kid. Just keep telling your story." She grinned and ran back to her friends. I looked around, at Jasmine joking with a guest, Amanda refilling teapots, the gallery humming with life, and knew I was home. The past wasn't asleep anymore, but neither was I, and for the first time that felt like enough. What I learned through my ordeal is that hiding from the past doesn't make it go away, it only gives it power over your future. The truth can be a destructive force, but it's also the only thing that can truly set you free. It allows you to break cycles and build a legacy based on integrity, not lies. Don't let inherited secrets dictate your life. Confront them, own your story, and build something beautiful from the rubble. Thank you for listening, and remember to always choose courage over comfort.